Good evening, folks. I can't tell you how honored Paul and I to announce tonight's guest, General Michael Flynn. We did a pre-recording of our interview with General Flynn because the man is so busy. We've been trying to schedule this interview for months now. He travels all over the world. So we're honored that he gave us so much time to talk about some of the things that he's been involved in, talking about what happened to him with the Trump administration and those scumbags, Comey and the rest of them, being persecuted by the left, talking about how we need all to get involved to save our country. All of us need to get involved. We can't sit back and say, oh, Donald Trump's the president and we're going to be saved now. No, the battle just begun. And this is a different battle than America's been in since our conception. And we all have to get involved. We all have to fight. You don't have to go and be, combative like me and get in the front lines. But, run for school board, become a committeeman, do something to save the country for the future of our children, the future for America, and those who fought for our country, like General Flynn and my co-host, Paul. So, please watch this, enjoy it, share it. And again, we're so honored to have General Flynn's time for this interview, and we really, really appreciate it. And we need him to continue doing his work. And he's got a movie out. It's flynnmovie.com, and we need you guys to go look that up as well and watch it and share it and keep fighting for America. Thank you very much.
Considered highly skilled when it comes to intelligence gathering.
33 years in the U.S. Army.
Flynn knew exactly how the system worked. He knew exactly what the intel world had been up to. He understood its funding. They had to get rid of Flynn.
President's former national security advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleading guilty today to lying to the FBI.
There was a moment where I just felt like I was drowning.
President Obama referred to ISIS as the JV team. Do you feel as though your warnings were ignored?
We all knew that he was one of the most respected generals in the military. Plain and simple.
Well, in 2012, he was appointed director of Defense Intelligence Agency. He ordered the first audit of the use of DIA's use of contractors. This set off alarm bells.
And so I'm in there with these other political appointees. They're all supposed to go in there and tell what they believe to be the truth. What they did was they took my assessment and they wanted me to change it. And I was like, I'm not changing it.
Mike Flynn, whatever you think of him or his politics, did not lie, but instead told the truth. And so he was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
President Obama said, but I do have one specific recommendation. Stay away from Michael Flynn. He's bad news.
I went into the service because I love our country. And I come home and I find out that the worst enemy that I'm going to face in my life is right here in America.
Even had he not served his country, even if he were not a combat veteran, to turn something like this loose on a family, I mean, it's monstrous.
The media was out there in droves.
I went into a very deep depression, like suicidal depression. The only thing that kept me alive was my son.
We always knew that we somehow had to get through it because we knew he wasn't guilty.
Over time, instead of being pounded down below the surface of the ocean, we started to fight. I'm now above the surface. But I can see the shoreline. And I started to swim.
Hello, General Flynn. We've been waiting for such a long time. We're so excited to have you on the show. We are very honored. Again, this is Terry Newsom, Paul Drabick, and just, Thank you very much for finding time for a couple
Absolutely.
of laymen.
I know we've been trying to connect, and so I appreciate your patience and just everything that you're doing on your show and trying to get the information out to, your audience. Super important.
Yeah, we are behind enemy lines here in Illinois. We just lost a big election, a lot of Democrats in the state. But you've been a fighter for a long time. I feel like I've been following you for 17 years. It's been a drag for the last few years, I'm sure, and you went through a lot. Can you kind of give us your background in the military, how you made it to where you were at, maybe just a high level, and then we can get into, the persecution by the government. That's the most interesting part.
Sure. So my family's legacy is military service. Okay. Going back to when my family first came to the United States of America prior to World War I. So both my grandfathers served in World War I. One of those grandfathers served in both World War I and World War II. My father served in World War II and the Korean War. I have a brother that served during the Vietnam era. I have, my brother Charlie just retired as a 4-star from the Army. Of course, I rose to the levels I rose to in the service. My son continues to serve. His son continues to serve. I've got, probably close to 75 nieces and nephews. I would say 20% of them are in the military. So our military is in our blood, in our family, and those around our family. And that's just the way that's how we are. That's like, some people, have a what they call a PhD. And in my neighborhood, it stands for a papa that has dough. And other people come from different walks of life, And so my father was a sergeant in the Army. I have 9 brothers and sisters. When my father got out of the Army, he became a teller in a bank because he knew, he was good with money. He's probably good with playing cards too. And, so here we are with 7 children, as a young kid and a tough Irish Catholic family. And, so, you worked hard, you live by the golden rule, meaning you treat others like you like to be treated, no bullshit. And then, then I always thought from the time I was a kid, because I was actually, when my father was stationed in Germany, when I was a young child, that's when my first connection with really seeing the military as a young kid and being around the military. I always knew from the time I was a little kid that I was going to join the military. I didn't know whether I was going to go in the Army or not, but I ended up going into the Army. I'm not a West Point graduate. I am a public school for the most part. I did go to a Catholic school in elementary school, but then public school. Then I went to my state university, ROTC. So I'm a hard worker. I love the military. I love people. I was effective in many of the units I went to. I always say that I started off in a really good unit. I started off in the 82nd Airborne Division as my first unit of assignment, and that really showed me a lot about effective teams and good organizations. And the 82nd was a great organization. And I came in. I went through ROTC at the tail end of the Vietnam War. So I was coming out of high school, going into college, and I was wanting to go to ROTC, and all these other people were just like, the military was in a state of shambles at the time, coming off of Vietnam. And here I am wanting to go in, right? Because that was my legacy. That was my family. My father, he encouraged it. My mother encouraged it. So all that stuff, and then then I get out of the military as a senior intelligence officer in the Department of Defense and leading one of the largest intel agencies in the world. And then I waded into politics because, frankly, people were asking me for my advice, namely candidate Donald J. Trump. Politics was not my bag at all, and still isn't. I can't stand it because you see the corruption and the political hackery that we have inside of politics. And we've got the worst people in politics, the absolute worst people that we have in our country go into politics, and they stay in politics. You know, you can say there's a few good ones, and I could, name a few that are decent people, but, and, some of the people that are now getting into politics because they see the corruption. Well, I mean, that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to go in to help the country. And then what we find out that we've got a bunch of people that are on the inside and on the outside that are literally trying to change this country from a constitutional republic to a communist nation overnight. And it started really with the likes of Barack Obama, but it really does go back to it goes back to others. I mean, Jimmy Carter, you could throw Jimmy Carter in there, who created the Department of Education. And then, of course, the Clintons, and then you have the wars in the Middle East. One of the stupidest strategic decisions ever made wasn't made by a Democrat president. It was made by a Republican president whose last name happened to be Bush. And that was the war in Iraq, right? So not anything against our military service and what the military did in the war on terror, but that decision to go into Iraq was the biggest strategic blunder of this century to date, because it cost us not only lives, but it cost us treasure. And while we were trying to figure out what to do over in Afghanistan, so I go on and on and on and on here, folks. And then the Obama regime comes in for 8 years. And like Obama said, I'm going to fundamentally transform America. And he still is at it. And then you have, like Trump likes to call him Sleepy Joe. Everybody knew Sleepy Joe had mental health problems even while he was the vice president. Okay. Now it wasn't as advanced. So, how much more do you want me to go on?
Well, yeah, you hit on a few things there. Now your background is, as you got up into the ranks in intelligence, right? So you're obviously very familiar with how our intelligence agencies work. I want to take you back, which you covered in your film, and I've followed you in the media to the point where President Obama was having a conversation with President Trump, and two of the things that he told him to look out for were you in North Korea. And I know that one of the things that you had mentioned that got you some flack when you were in the Obama administration was when you had testified before Congress with Comey and Brennan and Clapper, and you're kind of like shining the light on how we were not playing to win, essentially, I guess is the way I would describe it, in the Middle East and Afghanistan and so forth. So anyway, I want to take you there and let you go from there. Why can you explain to us why you think that President Obama thought you were such a problem? Were you a thorn in the side of the military industrial complex? Is that why they wanted to, get rid of you, because you weren't playing ball in that sense? Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is I am not somebody that can be bought. Okay. I'm not somebody who cares about the fame and the glory and the retired board seats that you get with big companies, big defense contractors, and big bucks as again, I'm running one of the largest intel agencies in the world. So there's all, if I played by their rules, my life would be set, and I wouldn't be going through all the bullshit and the hate. I still get a lot of hate. I still get a lot of threats, to my family and I. But the problem is they picked the wrong guy, and they picked the wrong family, to mess with. So I'm not somebody who was going to toe the line because it was politically the correct thing to do. That's just not me. I mean, I didn't serve in the military to be a political hack, and I didn't serve in combat, 5 years of my life in combat, and then grow up to be a political hack, like guys like Jim Clapper, John Brennan, Jim Comey, and others that were in that, very famous hearing that you're talking about. So, I'm not somebody that they could buy, and I'm not somebody that was going to play the political game. And frankly, I'm still not, I'm not, this is how I am. Now, when I was in uniform, I was very professional, very behind the scenes, and I would use the chain of command like it's supposed to be used. And I would let it be known how I felt about, certain decisions that were being made. At the time, that you're talking about, bin Laden had recently been, killed, right? Bin Laden's dead. Al Qaeda's on the run. Yeah, bin Laden was dead, but Al Qaeda was not on the run. Al Qaeda was morphing, and it was actually I think it was 24 or 25 countries. And I say that, and lay that out specifically in the movie. People can go to flynnmovie.com and check it out. But I say that specifically in there. And they say Flynn knows where the bodies are buried. I mean, this is not about dead people. This is about knowing how these organizations, how the bureaucracy functions, how the intelligence community functions. And what we have learned is that the CIA was directly responsible for the assassination of at least one president, right? JFK. Those files have finally come out. So, I mean, we're talking about organizations inside of the United States government that frankly don't care who the president of the United States is. They're the ones that feel like they will have the authority to run the government the way they want it to run. And that's principally in the United States intelligence community, mainly led by the Central Intelligence Agency. That's what they do. And so who's in charge of it today? John Radcliffe. Is John Radcliffe focusing on reform? Is John Radcliffe taking it down to the levels that it needs to be taken it to? Is he returning it to its, to its original mission? I don't see that happening. And frankly, John Radcliffe's he's a decent guy. Trump appointed him into that job. The Senate confirmed him. We'll see what he does. I'm a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard as the director of national intelligence. I've actually known Tulsi for a long time since she was a member of Congress, and I have a lot of respect for her. And I actually see her taking on sort of tasks and duties and responsibilities with some of the things that she's trying to do. But she's got her hands full because it's not just one agency. It's 16 or 17, depending on which day you want to count. And it's a large budget and a large body of people that frankly think that they run the world. That it doesn't make any difference who the president of the United States is, who's the head of the intelligence community. They don't care. They'll wait you out. They'll wear you out. And a guy like me, I'm not sitting here today with you guys because woe is me. I'm sitting here today because if we don't get this right, we don't have a country. Our country is, I'm serious. I am deadly serious when I say this. Trump doesn't get this right. The next, whoever it is not. Trump has a unique opportunity because he's not a political guy. He is a businessman who decided to give up his entire life to try to help this country. It's not, and this has nothing to do with him not taking a salary, all the abuse that he's been living under. I mean, I'm right there. There's no one else that's been more abused, than me, other than Trump. No one, and I know that.
Yep.
And so all this, everything that I'm saying, we have a historical moment in time right now, guys, where President Trump must stand strong. And you guys, I don't know when this is going to come out, or, I mean, Pete Hegseth is in a whirlwind right now, and Trump's going to either have to come out and say something strongly about him to stand up for Pete again here and say, we need to move on. We have a country to save.
Yeah, I tell people, most people don't know we're in a war. We're in the middle of a war, and we're losing the war badly, and we can't rely on President Trump to save our country. We all have to support him, and going through these tariffs and all these other things that are going to be necessary for him to help us. I also say it was a gift from God that Trump won the first election. I think as a country we are very fortunate, even though he lost by cheating, that he lost that last election, because I don't think we'd be able to do all the things that we're trying to do now if he won back to back. Do you know what I'm saying, General Flynn? Because I think it exposed the country to all the corruption.
So you're making a good point. You're making a great point, actually. And I've said this because, as a guy who has studied our enemies and looks at adversaries, if I were them, now this is hindsight, but I've said this a number of times, almost exactly what I'm saying to you guys here in a second. I've made this argument way back. And I said, you know what? The Democrat Party, which is not a Democrat Party anymore, it's gone. It's now a Socialist Party of America. They would have been wiser to have allowed Trump to win in 2020, continued to just bash him, right, for the next 4 years. And guess what? Trump by now would be gone. And Trump in his last 2 years would have been neutered as a president to be able to do anything, because they would have been focused on the 2024 election and and who's running. and Trump would be gone. They should have let him win, but they got so greedy and they allowed their egos to get in the way. And what happened was, they got rid of Trump. They got rid of him with a rigged election. It was definitely rigged. So they got rid of him with a rigged election. And then what they didn't realize, and they didn't realize it with me as well, they didn't realize that Trump was not going to, go back to New York and get back into real estate or get back into, playing golf and give up on this country. Trump is the last guy that's going to give up on this country, just like Mike Flynn is. And I'm going to tell you, when Trump started to float that he was going to run again, it scared the shit out of these people. And every time that I got out, in front of the public eye over these last 4 years at Reawaken America tours or at Lincoln Reagan dinners or in other speeches that I've given, they were like, is Flynn ever going to shut up? What's up with this guy? I thought we had crushed his soul. And they don't realize what it takes to crush my soul. They don't realize what it takes to crush the soul of Donald J. Trump. And they couldn't in either case. And so Trump said, I'm going to run for president again. And believe me, it took the wind out of their sails. And Trump emerged as a historic mandate victory president again. And frankly, I'm okay if he decides, if they can figure out a way for him to run or for him to be a president a third time, I'd be okay with that, because we're in that kind of a desperate situation with this potential takeover of our country by a very, very well dug in establishment, rhinos, you can call them whatever you want, a globalist elite that want to control this country. And I frankly think that if Trump can figure out legally how he can run for a third term, I'd be right there with him, being one of his biggest champions.
Both you and Paul put your lives on the line, fighting, in battle and stuff. I never had the opportunity, but I believe this is the most important war of our lifetimes right now. Even though it's like physically our lives aren't on the line, but they will be if we don't win. And I just wish the rest of America will wake up and understand that we're fighting for the future for our children and our country. And this is a war, and they have to take it seriously as if it's a war.
Yeah. The idea of removing God from every conversation, every element, every part of our fiber in America is one of the big things that the left wants to do. Believe me. And look at the attack on Christianity. Look at the attack on Catholics that are praying at Planned Parenthood, locations and stuff like that. So that's one big element, because, whether they want to agree to it or not, doesn't make any difference. The facts are this country was founded on principally Christian values and principles, and we should be fearless about that. I've written a book a long time ago where I actually state that the United States of America is built mainly, the values and principles are built on Judeo-Christian principles and values, and we should be fearless about that. That's number one. That's a big aspect of it. But the bigger question, Terry, is really the question of, it's like you said to me and to Paul, thank you for your service in uniform to our country. I never served. But the big question is, so how do you serve? People say that to me all the time. And I'm sure, Paul, you get it. When people come up to you, go, thank you for your service. Thank you for serving. I never served. And I turn around because I'm humbled. I'm humbled by that message from people. And I appreciate it. I deeply appreciate it. But I try to turn it around in a way where I say, okay, so to you, Terry, so how do you serve? You're serving in a capacity right now where you have a voice and you're getting a message out. But every single American in this country who maybe does not have the DNA or the fiber or whatever to serve in a military position. Well, okay. So how do you serve? Because if you're not serving our country in some capacity, I don't care, even if it's just praying every day, but if you're not serving our country as an American citizen and as an adult, then you're doing a disservice for this period of history, because this period of history is going to be defined by one of two things. Either this is the last era of a constitutional republic called the United States of America, 250 years here that we're heading into, or this is going to be the renewal and the reformation of America, so we can go another 250 years as a constitutional republic. There was a study done back in the late 1930s of 7 nations, And what were the indicators that showed why they collapsed, right? Empires, to, Ottoman Empire to the Roman Empire, right? And the Ottoman Empire is the longest serving empire in the history of the world. Then you have, the Byzantine, you got Athenian, Roman, British, and then of course I mentioned the Ottoman. You know what the average lifespan for those were? Because they range from like 1,400 years to slightly over, I think it was 75 years. The average lifespan was 250 years. 250 years. So we're at that point in time, and each time, each one of those empires had a series of leaders that got them to that point. Some were historic. We are blessed right now, like it or not, folks. We are blessed right now to have a guy named Donald J. Trump, who understands that this is an existential period of time. I mean, Trump is the guy that's talking about, we're never going to be a socialist nation. I didn't say that. He said it. He said it during a 2018 State of the Union speech. Go back and look it up, where he said in a State of the Union speech, America will never be a socialist nation. Why the hell does an American president have to say that during a State of the Union speech to a joint session of Congress? And that's because he realized it then. And frankly, those forces are being brought to bear right now. And whether they're in the media, Hollywood, the globalist community, members of the establishment, the elite corporate and banking elements in our country that are leading us down this path towards basically what? A socialist country, a communist country? Because that's where we're headed.
Hey, General Flynn, on that note, so you bring up socialism. You brought up how the Democrat Party has turned communist. I've been talking about that a lot on this show because I look at the legislation in Illinois, and it essentially it violates the United States Constitution. A lot of it is infringement on our civil rights here, but they do it because they can create state laws and they have a supermajority in Pritzker and so forth. One of the things that you've worked on recently was that book with Boone Cutler, the fifth generation warfare book. And what you talk about in there is that we're in a fifth generation of warfare, essentially, from sticks and stones to swords to gunpowder to now it's psychological. And it seems as though that the left had figured that out before us, or at least the powers that be had figured out using communism and socialism, embedding it into the institutions was the way to take down America. Can you talk a little bit about that book? Your background in psychological operations, and when you talk about Americans getting involved and serving their country in many myriad ways, can you talk about how they can do that via your book, Fifth Generation Warfare?
Yeah. So the name of the name of it's a series. There's three part series. The first is Introduction to Fifth Generation Warfare, 5GW, right? And it's a citizen's guide to fifth generation warfare. And Boone Cutler, who is a retired sergeant from the United States Army, Special Forces guy with background in psychological operations. And then, of course, myself, and we're the co-authors of it. The second series is How to Fight Artificial Intelligence. The third in that series is The Role of the Church. So the Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare, Introduction to 5GW. People can go to generalflynn.com. And they can find that book. They can go to flynnmovie.com and find that book. It's a great book. This is really about cognitive warfare, meaning what's between right here. When we hear words like disinformation, malinformation, misinformation, deception. I actually talk about it in the movie. War is deception. All war is deception, because you have to present yourself sometimes that you're bigger than you actually are to an adversary in order to make them, misunderstand your strengths and weaknesses. Well, in the world of fifth generation warfare, this is really about the cognitive battle space between your ears and making sure that there is confusion and denial and deception and misperceptions and misdirections. Right? It doesn't mean that there's not physical aspects of it. There are clearly physical aspects of it. Well, one of the things that has occurred, and I think the left, this is where, like as you say, they seem to be, They seem to be applying these elements of fifth generation warfare. The left now, the Chinese manual, Irregular Warfare, which was written in the late 90s by a couple of Chinese colonels, both of whom I met, by the way. So I want people to know that. And had a presentation by them to me in a small group when I was attending the United States Navy War College years ago. And so the left has taken that, because that's basically that manual on irregular warfare is essentially warfare without war, right? Doing it through economic means, doing it through political means, doing it through infiltration and espionage and other ways, breaking down a society without going to war with them, right? And so look at what the Chinese are doing with things like introduction of fentanyl, working with now these designated foreign terrorist organizations like the MS-13, the cartels, the drug cartels, right? The Chinese have been doing a lot of this. The Chinese have killed in action. So we have multiple, you'd understand this, right? KIA, killed in action, or WIA, wounded in action. We have hundreds of thousands of KIA on the streets of America over the last, let's just say the last 5 years, if not the last 20, right? With methamphetamine, which they introduced, now it's fentanyl, which they introduced, and they actually make it. And then they brought it here. And then they actually brought the labs to Mexico and now up in Canada. So they are killing in action U.S. citizens. They are wounding in action many, many hundreds of thousands more. And they're doing this without firing a shot. Economic elements, these physical aspects of introducing different things, the biological introduction of COVID, right? I mean, the Chinese were smart. We were stupid because we had stupid people running these things, or liars. We had many people that were liars. I mean, Donald J. Trump, when he was president of the United States, his task force that was run by Mike Pence and Fauci and Birx, they lied. They lied to Trump about what he needed to do, what was going on. I mean, we now know, just recently, it came out the last couple of weeks, where they now know where and we've known this from the beginning, that they had an international sports conference over in China during the latter part of 2019, where I think it actually took place in the October or September-October timeframe, where athletes came back to the United States that were sick with this COVID, right? That was really the early indications, and we saw that. And they didn't even bother to, Trump's got a lot of things on his mind. Now Trump has learned, and he's in the middle of a knife fight as a president of the United States, but he's only one man. Back to what I want people to understand is we all have a duty to serve this country, whether you do it in uniform or whether you do it in your community. Now's the time to, stand up, step up, and speak up. And I use the phrase local action has a national impact. You get involved locally, you can have a national impact. You get involved in your school boards, you get involved in your city councils, you get involved in your town councils, your parish councils. The bottom line is get involved. And all these people out there that are bitching about, politics and say, well, I don't do that political thing. Tough, then you're not going to have a country. We're not going to have a country. To have the democracy that we have, and this thing called a constitution and a constitutional republic, which is what we are. We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. In order to maintain that, it is going to require sacrifice, and in some cases, sacrifice by every legal American citizen in this country that cares about their freedom. If we don't have that, we're not going to have anything. And we have one shot with Donald Trump. This is no longer Republican versus Democrat. And you know what, guys? That's why they went after me. That's why Obama told Trump, don't hire this guy. That's why, because exactly what you're hearing me say right now. You know what? And I'm a guy that learns lessons, and I've learned a lot of lessons. I've learned some big lessons, and now I've learned even more. And now is our time to be able to, step up and speak out about what it is that we're facing. If people don't want to listen, fine. That's fine. I'm trying to do my part to warn, those that are willing to listen, that our country is always at risk. Always. It will always be at risk, and it requires sacrifice. If you want to go out and make big bucks at, working hard and doing the things you need to do, fine. But figure out a way to turn that around and help your communities, out. And that's, that's my message.
Jennifer, do you think, with what happened to you in this current administration, that people, and I believe they have to be punished. People have to be punished.
So let me cut to the chase on that, because I knew, because I'm going to run out of time here, guys, and I appreciate so much you having me on and being patient with me. If we don't hold people accountable, there's two things that our founders taught us: courage and accountability. Both of them were demonstrated by our founders. They demonstrated their courage by actually doing the things that they did in order to create this beautiful country. Otherwise, they all knew, had they not done that, had they been caught, had they been arrested at the time, they would have been hung. And many of them suffered. Most of them suffered. The second thing that they taught us was accountability. And it really ties to the very first. Every single one of them held themselves to account for their actions. And they did it in a way where it's like, hey, I know if this doesn't work out, I'm going to either have to, go west, young man, or I'm going to get captured and hung by the British monarch. So we have those two elements in our very character of those people who have led our country from the beginning. And so, if we don't hold people accountable for the egregious, treasonous, conspiratorial actions that they did to get this country to where it is right now, we're in big trouble. And Trump's going to he may end up having to hold people personally accountable for some of the things that they did. And to me, one of those things is the 5th of January, 2017, in the Oval Office, led by none other than Barack Obama. That's a very, very well documented meeting. It's got evidence to show it. And it had directly to do with me. It was the get Flynn to get Trump meeting. That's what it was all about. And it damn near worked. But what happened was they ended up just screwing with the wrong guy. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back, because this has been freaking hard. My family has been brutalized. My life, the death threats, having to get yourself back up off your knees and take a stance. Right. I mean, and even it goes on in the social media world of social media today with all the bullshit that I have to deal with the Flynn network does it. Flynn network does that. It's all bullshit, total bullshit. It's people that hate this country, that want to do damage to President Trump. And many of them pretend with their little MAGA flags or MAGA hats. A lot of pretenders out there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm enamored by anybody. I am not. But I will tell you that there's one thing that I will not, stand for, is anybody who wants to take this country towards communism or socialism. That's, and so while I can, with what God has given me, I'm going to stand up for it, and I will help. And because I do know Trump feels the same way, guys. He feels the same. He loves his country. Otherwise, why the hell is he doing what he's doing? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're trying to destroy this man every single day. They tried to put him in prison. If he didn't win this election, he'd be in prison right now for the rest of his life. Guaranteed. 100%. In prison for the rest of his life had he not won this presidency.
Jennifer, you and President Trump are, high profile figures, and they even let, I'm just a father who spoke out against porn. I peacefully attended January 6th. So they went after high profile figures, but I was labeled a domestic terrorist. The FBI was at my house. I didn't do anything wrong at January 6th. I was a very vocal dad about the pornography. And the next thing you know, I'm on a terrorist watch list. And if it wasn't for Matt Gaetz getting involved and sending a demand letter to Garland, Ray, and Mayorkas, asking them why they put me on the watch list, they never answered them. They said they got the letter. Here's years later. I still don't know why I was on a watch list, and it wasn't until after these letters went in from Congressman Gaetz and Troy Niels that 6 months later I was taken
people
off.
People need to go back. List. Yeah, people, Terry, I know I feel so bad that that happened to you and many, many others. People got to go back and study the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, post World War I. Study it. Go read it. There's some easy books to read. People can go do a little Google research on it, and you can probably find enough to where this is what we're involved in. We're involved in a revolution right now, a communist form of revolution here in the United States of America. It can't be quite like the Bolshevik Revolution because people aren't putting up with it. And frankly, the American people aren't. So they come after people like you. They come after people like me to put the fear in others. So people go, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to say nothing. I don't want to get my name in the newspaper. I don't want to have the FBI visit me and knock on my door. I don't want to have to get the 4 X's on my and if I want to fly around the country to go visit grandma, right? I mean, we've seen all this. We've seen it all. So the American people in this country, in the United States, have to begin to realize that we are at risk. We are at risk. Just watch what's going to happen this week, okay, with all these attacks on the current Secretary of Defense. These people aren't done. Look at what they're doing to try to get an illegal back into this country who is a felon, a brutal felon. He's not just a felon. He's a brutal felon. I mean, what is the left for? They are for everything that is against our way of life. They are for everything that is against our Bill of Rights and our freedoms. And yet they're going to sit there and they're going to tell us how we're a threat to democracy. First of all, we're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. So they see somebody like you, Terry, and they go, threat to democracy. We got to get these guys out of the way because maybe, I don't know what you were doing at the time. Maybe you had your podcast at the time, and they said, man, this guy's got, there's people that listen to him. We got to rip these guys out. We got to rip them out of the fabric of America. And you know what they did too with J6, which was fake. J6 was a setup. Okay. It was a total setup. So what they did with J6, who did they go after? They went after a lot of vets, a lot of veterans. And it kind of made the veterans community feel like, geez, I'm not part of that. I'm not, I didn't go into I wasn't there, but it made veterans back away from getting more and more involved. So anyway, guys, listen, I got a split.
Hey, so thank you. One last thing, the Catholic charities and stuff, I know I sent you said you want to go after and expose them. If there's anything we can do in the future, because I'm a Catholic, I'm very appalled at what they're doing in Chicago. So if you start really looking into that, let me know how I could help, or because we got to get to the bottom of this, and they're part of destroying our country, unfortunately.
Well, the government, the U.S. government and DOJ is really the one that really got it going. But the U.S. government, places like DHS, Department of Justice for sure, they got to look into all these non-governmental organizations, right? All these things, all these religious organizations. There's not just the Catholic charities, but we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that are given by taxpayers. I mean, you might not be a Catholic. Well, guess what, taxpayer? You're giving money to all these religious organizations, and they're using it for what? To be part of a problem, a very problematic component of our immigration system, which is child trafficking. And you mess with children, in the Bible, it talks about, it's the one area where they yoke and you get thrown into the ocean or whatever, right? I'm not a biblical scholar, but, so Catholic Charities of America, when the Council of Catholic Bishops starts to come after you and the Catholic Charities of America starts to fight, instead of saying, no, hey, look, here's our books, here's our books. Go look in our books. Go check us out. You can audit us, no problem. Check us out. We're spending every single dime on the following things. No, what they do is they fight tooth and nail, from the exposure that an organization like DOJ is doing. And frankly, I do believe that the Department of Justice is going to have to look at some of these organizations and take a look at where this money went, because it flowed somewhere. It didn't flow to accomplish the mission, which is in the big mission would be saving children. And I think that's, my thing is, if we don't save children, if we don't save the future of this country, either intellectually, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, then we're screwing ourselves going into the future. And I know that Trump is the one president, while he was the 45th president, as well as now, that has actually talked about doing this and raised it. And these other presidents never talked about it, because you know what? They're part of the problem. Maybe they're maybe they are part of the problem. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, I'm not going to give up, guys.
We appreciate your time. Just one quick question for you to close. Are we in a political civil war?
I think we're in a counter-revolution. I think we're in some type of counter-revolution where the people of this country are countering the idea that our government makes all the decisions in our lives instead of we the people. And I think we the people have started to realize that too many of the decisions were being made by our government, which is not the way our system is designed. So I believe we're in a form of a counter revolution, and I think Trump is at the helm of it. For you can, and maybe it's a component, maybe it's MAGA, maybe it's a different groups of people. Because as a guy who was grew up not political, but as in a Democrat family, we didn't grow up like this. We didn't grow up like it was arguing about big government, little government, and we looked at the Republicans as the elite. That's flipped on its head. So I do believe that we're in some form of counter revolution right now. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for so much time too. I know you're a busy man, so we really appreciate it. We're honored.
Appreciate that.
Yep, absolutely, guys. And thanks again for being patient and being persistent about reaching out. Okay.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, General.
God bless, guys.
Bye.